On today's show, we've got an interesting late riser and an interesting NTDP center. We'll talk about Brodie Ziemer on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hattie Kalakash, Director of North American Scouting for Dobber Prospects, joined by Sebastian Hyde, Director of European Scouting and Head Scout for Dobber Prospects. And on today's show, we'll talk about Brodie Ziemer in detail. Ziemer's an NTDP center who rose kind of late on boards, but really impressed in his later half of the season. We'll talk about his puck skills first and foremost in the first segment, kind of talk about the skating, the handling, the shooting, the passing, all that good stuff. In the second segment, we'll look at the toolkit, the habits, and the decision making, so kind of more the intricate stuff in his game. And then in our final segment, we'll talk about which team would be the best fit for Ziemer, if he's worth a first-round pick, and overall, what's kind of the upside, the projection with him. Before I get into any of that, though, please remember to like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Make sure to leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rating and review. Make sure you make us your first listen of the day. And by the way, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. Let's get into it right away here with Brodie Ziemer. Talk me through the size, handedness, where he played, how many points he put up, all that good stuff.
For sure. So Brodie Ziemer is a 5'11", 192-pound right shot forward who's played either at center or at right wing over the course of the past season for the NTDP. He captained the program this year as well, showing off his leadership capabilities, especially at the U18 World Championships, where he was a very vocal leader, both on and off the ice for that team. And this season, through 61 games in all competitions for the program, he scored 27 goals and added 43 assists for 70 points. At the U18 World Championships, he played in all 7 games and scored 3 goals and 12 points, which was one of the best marks on that USA team behind James Higgins and Cole Hudson. He's also off to a strong program next season at the University of Minnesota in the NCAA, where he could be a really solid middle six piece right out of the gate. He'll be playing alongside guys like Matthew Wood and Jimmy Snuggerud, which is a rather interesting place for him to be playing next season. But this is a player who, as you mentioned, has been a bit of a later riser this season, and that's been down to just how projectable he is to the NHL style. He does so many things that both coaches and teammates and management value really, really highly. And he's a true line elevator and a facilitator. He does a lot of that dirty work in the corners or off the puck. And he does a lot of small details really nicely. I think the second segment is going to be a real area of strength for this player when we're talking about the overall toolkit and the habits, because they're quite refined with Ziemer. But let's start off with the puck skills here first and foremost. And the goal scoring is pretty solid, isn't it?
100%. I absolutely love his curl and drag wrister. It's one of his best tools offensively, and he uses it liberally. He's a player who loves to receive pucks inside of small pockets. We'll talk about how good he is at getting into those pockets in the second segment, but to focus on the tool specifically, once he's in that pocket, he receives a pass. He's really good at going from corralling a pass into the wrist shot right away through that curl and drag motion. He'll kind of push off his top arm and use a lot of leverage and downforce in order to kind of lift that puck quickly, hard, and accurately. And I think that's really kind of the cornerstone of his offensive game moving forward. I think that he's going to develop into a kind of goal-scoring forward as he continues to progress, goes through the system in the NCAA and kind of rounds out his game. I think the goal scoring is going to start standing up more and more and more. It's been my favorite part of his game. And he's not really limited to one release. He's really good at snapshots. He's really good at kind of receiving pucks and pulling them wide before pulling them back in again as well. Great one-timer as well. He's got a decent goal-scoring ability. For me, it gives him a good 5.5, 6 grade in terms of scoring. And it's got potential to grow even further than that as he progresses. But talk me through the passing game, because it's not even that bad either, right? It's a pretty good element of his game.
It is. It's not the most creative passing game in the world, but there's a reason that he logged 43 assists this season. He's a really good progressive passer in terms of building play up incrementally in through the neutral zone and into the offensive zone in transition. He finds open teammates really well. I like his patience and composure on puck. He's able to wait for passing lanes to develop, and even though he doesn't find the most complex passes available to him or the most complex passing lanes that he has at his disposal, he consistently hits the passing options he chooses, and the puck almost inevitably ends up in a better place where he sends it than where he receives it, which is already a great telltale sign for a player who's going to be impactful in an NHL capacity, whether that be on a fourth line or a third.
Absolutely, I really like the playmaking skill as well. But when it comes to stick handling ability, I feel like that's where Brodie Ziemer kind of struggles a tiny bit. I don't really like the handling skill all that much. He's kind of stiff in his motions. He's really, a player who benefits most from short puck touches, from quick give and goes. You give him the puck for too long. He doesn't really know how to leverage his hands in order to kind of get past an opponent, move around them, that kind of thing. Really simplistic stick handler. He'll use occasionally kind of a forehand backhand move to get around one wave of pressure when it's really obvious. So there's still some to work with there, but I think it's certainly below average. I'd give it him 4.5 grade in terms of handling skill. But for me, the awareness and the ability to use a shot and his passing in order to get around problems, I think is really kind of the cornerstone of his game with the puck. Let's talk about the skating as well. I think it's bang average. It's really not the fastest player, but he makes up for his lack of kind of pure skating stride with real good energy, right?
Oh yeah, he has an absolutely relentless motor. Like the stride rate is definitely quite high with this player, and he reads the play really well. He's really intelligent also in his off puck movements and his routes, whether it be to loose pucks or to soft ice in the offensive zone. He's able to make up for lack of like really outstanding stride mechanics by just being really really intense and forcing his way to get to the places he needs to get to when he needs to get there. So I don't think that as movement throughout the ice is really an issue, especially with the way he approaches the game. Like this is a real energy checking winger. He doesn't need to be the most refined skater in the world to fulfill that role really, really effectively and to play his game well. So this isn't the most dynamic player with the puck on his stick, as you were mentioning, with those limited handling capabilities. So that lack of dynamic footwork doesn't really hurt him all that much either. So I don't see much issue with how he skates and how that layers in with how he approaches and plays the game.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's the main thing is when you look at players who have a below average element to their game, you're really looking for how do they compensate for that issue? And is that a translatable way to fix to kind of get around the problem? And will that prevent them from fixing it? I think that Ziemer's kind of motor and effort level only puts him in situations where he's only further likely to kind of improve his skating skill, his skating stride and mechanics as he progresses. Because he's in a lot of situations where he's skating hard, which means that a lot of his issues with time should be able to kind of round themselves out and become NHL level tools. I'd be surprised if he ends up as a below average NHL skater. I think that with enough time, with enough development, he can get into an area where you're more comfortable with him as a skater in the NHL. Let's talk about the physicality, last but not least. I think that this, apart from the shooting, is really the standout skill with Ziemer. His ability to handle physical pressure, to spin off of checks, to forecheck hard, to kind of outwork opponents down low and use his frame to protect the puck is really what makes him interesting in terms of pure tools, right?
Absolutely. He also has excellent leverage mechanics. So even though he's not the biggest, most imposing guy in terms of his frame, he routinely wins his puck battles against bigger, stronger opposition, even when he's been playing against college and NCAA level players. So I'm not overly concerned at all about how he projects on a physical basis. And as you mentioned, it's an above average tool for sure, like 5.5 or 6 grade, in my opinion. And it's not just that he outworks, it's that he has a lot of these finer details that make his outworking efficient. He's not wasting energy when he's trying to outwork opponents. He does so intelligently, and he also knows which tools he has that he can use to win those puck battles effectively and consistently.
For sure. I think that's a big standout for me. This is a prospect who just without being necessarily stronger than everyone is just more mechanically refined in board battles, and that's what makes him so effective. But that's our first segment done. We'll get into the second segment where we talk about the real meat of what makes Brodie Ziemer. We'll talk about the toolkit, the habits, and the decision making in just a sec. But just before, a quick word from our sponsors over at eBay Motors.
Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophies also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers to roof racks, to exhaust kits, LED headlights, and far more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, something that is available to US customers only. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you're always going to find exactly what it is that you're looking for. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car to the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply.
Alrighty, so moving on to our second segment, we'll be talking about Brodie Ziemer's toolkit, the habits, and the decision making, which is really what makes him this good. We'll talk about first and foremost the toolkit, so the way his tools interact. I think everything goes through the hockey sense and how it interacts with his other tools. It's kind of the same as what we talked about with Sam O'Reilly in our last episode, and our last prospect spotlight rather. And yeah, I mean, in terms of how his hockey sense interacts with his shot, it's really about positioning. It's all about getting to the right areas, beating forwards and beating defensemen to open ice in the slot, and just thinking faster than them in terms of how he processes open ice. That's really the meat and butter of Brodie Ziemer's goal scoring ability. You're not going to see Brodie Ziemer just kind of rip pucks into the top corner from mid to long range like a Cole Eiserman. He's really a move off the puck, find space, and rip pucks hard from in tight type of forward. He's really good in tight as well, which I really like. The fact that he's able to kind of outwork opponents under around the slot and around the net, and kind of find little pockets in order to spin off a check when a point shot comes in and kind of bang in the rebound, that kind of stuff. His goal scoring ability isn't high end or elite in terms of his shot itself, but it's so incredibly projectable. All the goals he scores are goals that are usually scored at the NHL level, which makes his projection fairly easily in terms of goal scoring ability. But how do you see the hockey sense interact with the playmaking specifically?
Again, it's quite simple and straightforward when you look at it, and it's not the most dynamic in the world, but it's very, very effective. It's a give and go based type of playmaking, and his brain functions at a very high pace, and he's able to pass and use his passing toolkit at those same speeds, and he processes the game so quickly, and he finds quick passing options. He hits them accurately, and he quickly moves into space. His feet never stop moving, so his passing game has so much to do with his own movement off the puck and his reads, and the weaknesses he finds in defensive structures, the pockets of space he's able to discover and plant himself into. He's also really good at integrating his physicality in with those two other things in order to create that space for himself and to pressure opponents and also then fall back into space that he creates. So a very intelligent, effective, straightforward, certainly, type of player, but who could be a really, really effective middle six type of NHL player who can play up the lineup in case of injuries. And it's a bit of a plug and play who can elevate any type of line, whether they're an all defense line or a two-way line, and just be that checking role. Or even if it's an offensive line and you have dynamic players that he's playing with, he can do a lot of the dirty work for them, playing either at center or on the wing. He's so versatile. And that type of Swiss Army knife type of style, on top of being such a good leader, both on and off the ice, that's worth gold on day 2 of the draft.
100%. I think that's the type of tools that a lot of, especially contenders, will be looking for. But let's talk about the habits, really, because, I mean, in terms of habits, there's a lot to work with here with Ziemer. I've already mentioned the off-puck movement, the tendency to kind of make his way to the slot, make his way to open ice in the offensive zone before anyone else can react. Which is a big part of how he processes a game, how he understands the kind of progression of offense in an NHL manner, even in the USHL, where he played this season mostly, or against kind of NCAA competition, which the NTDP will occasionally face, that kind of thing. What I've noticed as a constant is that Brodie Ziemer doesn't rely on things that don't work in the NHL when he's creating offense offensively. What really picks my brain when it comes to Ziemer is that lack of skating is going to be an issue as he moves forward. As smart as he is in terms of creating offensively, I think that there's limitations to how much he can separate from opponents in quick, tight spaces. So the thing with Ziemer is he's really good at getting to space before someone, but when he's shoulder to shoulder with a defenseman, for example, and looking to create space for himself, I feel like he struggles a bit more in that area. Part of that's going to be developing the habit of separating from that defender early, not letting him hang on to him in the offensive zone, getting lost behind backs, getting lost in coverage, that kind of stuff. That's what I'm looking for from McGroarty moving forward. But I do also want to talk about the decision making with Ziemer, because everything's so projectable in the way that he kind of makes decisions in the offensive zone, but even moving into the offensive zone and transition, the routes that he takes, the decision making when it comes to whether he should go to the left, go to the right, stay forward, stay in the same lane, slow down, accelerate. There's a lot of decisions that go into rush patterns, and he really manages that fairly well, right?
He absolutely does. Like, so much of his game is refined and polished, and that's one of the reasons that I struggle to see him dropping beyond like the top 40, top 45 on draft day, because there's so much in his game that just screams NHLer, and he won't need all that long to become one. Like, this could be a guy who plays a depth NHL role in 2 or 2.5 or 3 years time, and that type of shorter development path to becoming an effective and reliable NHLer is certainly appealing to NHL teams. And there's so much in his game that's polished, and it all comes back down to how quickly he's able to read play and how well his physical tools interact with those reads. And that's where all of that polish really comes from, is in that interaction, in that interplay. And it's something that only improved as the year progressed in the NTDP. He's a player that really rose up my draft rankings the more I saw him in high pressure environments, because he was such a consistent piece for the U.S. national team development program, especially at the U18 World Championships. Like, if they ever had to rely on one forward to score a dirty clutch goal, Brodie Ziemer was there. Even in the gold medal game, he scored the one goal after Trevor Connolly's 5-minute major. It was on like a tip, right? But he got a stick on it and it went in. And he's able to create in dirty environments and score those unlikely goals in ways that are very, very indicative of potential NHL playoff production, which is another big, big plus with Brodie Ziemer's projection.
100%. It's a great part of his game, in my opinion. And it's just all about projectability, physical tools. I can't help but think of Matthew Nyes when I watch Brodie Ziemer. In his draft year, he was projected to be about in the same range, in the 45 to 75 range on most rankings. Made the NHL fairly quickly, became a top player in Minnesota, like extremely quickly. And it was due to that physical skill, that intensity, that motor, and that goal scoring ability. I think Ziemer's main issue is he's a less good skater than Nyes. Nyes is certainly a better skater, but both have kind of similar physical tools, similar approaches to the offensive game, the ability to get off the boards, to outmuscle opponents, to spin off of checks. All that's there. So I'm very curious to see what happens with Ziemer in the next 2.5 years. But I agree with you. He could be making the NHL in that kind of term. But that's our second segment done. We'll get into our third, where we talk about the upside, the projection, which team would be the best fit for Brodie Ziemer, and also where he ends up on draft day. We'll get into that in just a sec, but just before, a quick word from our sponsors at Game Time. If you're looking to buy cheap tickets last minute to any event, Game Time is the best place to secure them. Game Time is safe, secure, and easy to use. They're really good in terms of getting you tickets last minute to any event. You can get tickets up until the last minute before the event starts, and sometimes even in an hour after it starts, the tickets will still be available, ready to purchase at Game Time. And it's not just for games. It's for anything that requires tickets. Sports, comedy, theater, you name it. They've got you covered, and they're obsessed with saving you money. They've got a bunch of deals to help you save. They've got flash deals. They've got zone deals. They've also got last-minute deals where you can save up to 60% on tickets by buying them last minute through Game Time. And the Game Time guarantee, make sure you always get the best price. If you find a ticket in the same section and row for less than what Game Time has to offer you, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL at checkout for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, super simple. You just create an account and use a code LOCKEDONNHL at checkout for $20 off. So download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Alrighty, so let's close things off here with Brodie Ziemer's projection, what his upside is. We'll talk as well about which team would be the best fit, where he ends up on draft day, all that good stuff. Let's start with the upside with Ziemer. Do you see realistically an outcome where he's a bona fide top sixer in terms of his projection, kind of like what Matthew Nyes became. I remember not thinking that Matthew Nyes would be anything more than a third liner, and then he became one of the best complementary top sixers on the Toronto Maple Leafs. So what do you think is the outcome here with Ziemer realistically?
I'm not going to say that there's no chance with top six upside. I think that there's enough of a foundation of really, really projectable tools and habits in his game that he could be a complementary piece on a second line. I think that's within the realm of possibility, especially with his positional versatility as well. The fact that he can play at center or on the wing is also a big plus, that he can be a bit of like a plug and play complementary piece, bouncing between the second and third lines. But I think it's more likely to project him as like your first call up into the top six when you have an injury, but who's mainly playing on the third line when your team's fully healthy. I think that would be a great position for Brodie Ziemer, because he is such a real line elevator and a facilitator in all three zones. And I think he has a lot of room to grow as well in his raw defensive impact, because he reads the game so well. He plays with such intensity and purpose and physicality. He knows how to clog up passing lanes. His role with the NTDP last year wasn't to be the shutdown defensive forward on the team, but whenever he was asked to play that role, especially on the penalty kill, he did so very, very well. So I think that there's some real room to grow into like a really high-end defensive forward on a third line, on top of all the offensive tools that we've been talking about in this episode. But one of the beauties of drafting Brodie Ziemer, if you're picking in that second round, is that you can develop him into a variety of things, or a mix of all of them, and it'll likely turn out pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the benefit of picking him up, and I think that's why I'm pretty sure he's going to be picked up before we get to the 40 range, at least, as one of the first picks of the second round, that kind of thing, is that he can play so many roles. He can be so many different players for an NHL team that you can kind of plug him anywhere and see the upside with him. I would personally, I have a bit of reservations regarding Ziemer. I don't think the upside is all there, because of the lack of skating, because of the lack of ability to kind of separate in translatable ways in the offensive zone. But I fully understand why NHL teams would go for him. He's a pretty safe bet to make the NHL. So yeah, let's talk about realistically. Like for me, realistically, Ziemer's outcome is a third liner, maybe fourth liner with some offensive pop to him. But the third line is really where I think he ends up kind of staying long term with an NHL team. Like there's a lot of value here in terms of a third line value, but even then, like there are some things, if his skating doesn't improve, which I'd be really, really surprised if it doesn't, but if it doesn't improve, I don't think we're talking about an NHLer. As good as he is defensively, as good as he is physically, as good as he is in terms of goal scoring, he doesn't really play at an NHL pace with his feet. He definitely does with his brain, but he's not just below average skating wise. He's like well below average skating wise with the way that his edge work works together with his game. Like I don't really like the way that he uses his edges. He's pedal to the metal. That's fantastic. But like, that's a big concern for me. So I wouldn't say he's 100% certain to be an NHLer, but the chances of that are fairly high, around 80-85%. Like usually guys like these, their skating improves with time. But now let's talk about which team would be the best fit for Ziemer, because there's a lot of options here that we can talk about. I'd say, let's start at the first pick of the second round and then work our way up, maybe down to like 55 for being conservative with Ziemer. Which teams in that range do you think first would be the most likely to target Brodie Ziemer? And then second, which teams do you think would be the best fit in terms of helping him get to where he needs to be in the NHL?
Yeah, I think like the Calgary Flames at 41 stand out to me as a team that would be really interested in his combination of certainty and also some type of upside offensively and as a goal scorer. And he plays the way that Calgary loves to play. Like he's a real Calgary Flame type of guy in his approach to the game, with that combination of intelligence and intensity and goal scoring ability. And not the prettiest of goals in the world, but they always count no matter how pretty they are. And I think Calgary would be a really nice fit for him. Another team that kind of stands out to me would be the San Jose Sharks at 42. So the next pick up after that. I think if they go defenseman with their second first-round pick, because they're probably going Celebrini at 1, I think that's a relatively safe bet to make at this stage. But if they go defense with that second first-round pick, yeah, I know, shocking. It's a hot take today. But I think if they go defense with that second first-round pick, going with the forward along the lines of a Brodie Ziemer who can help shore up that bottom 6, because they already have a bunch of soft skill in their forward prospect pool, whether it be Quentin Musty or Daniel Gushchin or Will Smith. I mean, they already have William Eklund in there. Like, there's a lot of guys that bring a bunch of skill to the table, but aren't perhaps the most refined in how they combine habits and physicality. And Ziemer would bring just that into a bottom 6 capacity, which I think would really help what the Sharks are trying to build here. And I know Mike Greer also appreciates players in that mold. I mean, they did just claim Barclay Goodrow off of waivers from the Rangers. And I mean, he's stylistically a very intense physical type of player. So I could see that type of fit as well with San Jose. But which teams here stand out the most to you? And especially which teams do you think can get the most out of his development?
I will throw the Pittsburgh Penguins in here. Mainly because they've got an aging core of really, really good players who could be a decent foundation in order to teach Brodie Ziemer how to play up the lineup. You know, if you're talking about compliments to the likes of Sidney Crosby and Gino Malkin and, you know, the types of fours that they have, you know, especially down the middle, I think that if you can put Ziemer on their wing, kind of like Matthew Nyes when he first got to the Toronto Maple Leafs and worked his way up, you saw him in the top 6 there. He played some games with Matthews and Marner. He played some games with Tavares and Nylander. He was kind of rotated up the lineup, and that's helped him really kind of create a foundation for his game. I think he can get the same out of Ziemer. And the Pittsburgh Penguins have 2 picks in the middle of the second round at 44th and 46. Those are 2 picks that could very well have Brodie Ziemer's name on them. And, you know, given what Ziemer brings to the game, I like I said, I really don't think that, especially teams that look for grit, that look for forechecking skill, you know, would pass him over too many times. The other option I would maybe say would be the St. Louis Blues at 48th. I think that's pretty much, I'd be really shocked if he gets past them. Like they like their big, aggressive, physical guys from the NTDP, from the NCAA pipeline, and he fits that role exactly. He's also, I believe, going to be joining Jimmy Snuggerud in Minnesota. So that's another kind of layer to that, is they're going to get a good look at him in the next 3-4 years as he kind of develops in that system. Jimmy Snuggerud should play this next year with Minnesota, and then he's gone. But Ziemer following in the footstep of Matthew Nyes in that program, I think is really fitting. I think they can get the most out of Brodie Ziemer in terms of his future. So Pittsburgh or St. Louis really makes sense to me. But lastly, I do want to talk about kind of where he ends up on draft day, because realistically, if we were to put a number to where he gets selected, I think 48 is the absolute floor of that, because I don't think he's getting past the St. Louis Blues. But what's the highest he could go? Are we talking about maybe kind of one of the last picks of the first round? Like, what do you think?
I think he could go as high as 25th to the Ottawa Senators. Like, the Sens love players in this mold as well. And I think that could be an option if a guy like Cool Baudouin or Liam Greentree or Jet Luchenko are no longer available to them, and they want to go with a forward after potentially going defense with their 7th overall selection on draft day. I think Ziemer could make sense as early as then. But I mean, even like at 30th overall, the New York Rangers, they love players like this. Like, they went out and picked Brett Berard a couple seasons ago, who bit similarly in terms of combining intensity and physicality and smarts to playing a really effective and projectable potential middle 6 role. And he should be an NHLer in about a year's time, or maybe even a couple months only. And I could see the Rangers wanting to go up that type of alley, but anywhere between that like 25 and 45 range, I think, is most likely. And yeah, if he's available at 48 to St. Louis, I think that's the pick to be made.
He's not getting past him, that's for sure. But that's the end of our episode. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, remember to like and subscribe. It takes a moment of your time, helps the channel a lot. And make sure to make us your first listen of the day if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports. And make sure to tune in for our next shows as we continue our prospect coverage for the month of June, and then head into July for the best part of the off season. The first couple of weeks after the draft are going to be really interesting for us. We'll be able to react to who picked who, all that good stuff. Stay tuned. This has been Hattie Kalikesh with Sebastian High, and we hope you tune in next time.